Turakihiya para one chiasatia tidamakiwa yana tiwaheya makiwa e. Trauma can become treasure or it can become a trap. Wisdom can become wonder or it can become a worry. Have you ever found yourself telling your same trauma story over and over again? Have you found yourself worrying about the wounds of the past? Have you turned your trauma into treasure? Sometimes. Have you turned your wounds into wisdom? Today we're going to share about this little paradoxical duality of potential, of opportunity. All of the world is neutral. Everything is just what it is. The story that we tell about what is determines our experience, and our experience and the story that we tell about our experience determines our interaction, our connection with the other beings and their stories on the planet. And so I got this little phrase coming today about traumas becoming treasures and wounds becoming wisdom, and how often we can vacillate between the wisdom and the worry and the treasure and the trap of using our trauma to be a victim, the trap of using our wounds to continuously worry what's coming next, worry what I've done, what I haven't done, worry why I can't do what I'm here to do because of the wounds of the past, because of the trap of the trauma, because we've not seen the treasure. And again, maybe you have, but at times you still find yourself going back to the same trauma story, and you trauma bond with others that resonate with the story. Nothing loves company like misery. And so I can say in my own life, I notice myself vacillating. I know I have found great treasure in the traumas that I've experienced. And I find myself sometimes trapped, mostly inwardly, mostly on an inward, which is a self-destructive tendency through the trauma. I have also found that the wounds that I've experienced have become deep wisdom, and especially when I've shared them with others and others can relate and that they can see how to reframe their wounds. But also I found sometimes those wounds can be a worry. I'm recording this video on the live video on East Star Sunday. And so I grew up in Northern Ireland in the Roman real estate cult. And I was 45 years old before I asked the question, why is Easter early on some years and late? I always remember people say, oh, Easter's early this year or Easter's late this year. And when you're born in the Roman real estate cult, if you're really in it, you don't question anything. You are dictated to from the book and you don't question anything. You just do what you're supposed to do. You go through all the rituals and you just do what you're told. And I've been questioning since I was 16 years old, but I was amazed as to how the most obvious thing in the world, if Easter is the date where the man called Jesus supposedly was crucified on a cross and rose, why is it not on the same day every day? Why is the date of birth, supposedly, of the man Jesus, 25th of December, on the same day every year, but the day that he was supposedly crucified is on a different day? And when you look into it, it's all pagan. It's all about the full moon. It's all about this ever-changing divine feminine nature of evolution that goes on moon cycles. And Easter is based on the moon and dependent on the full moon, and this changes all of the time. And so this priesthood, so we're going into the wounds and the trauma here. So this priesthood that was put between divinity and humanity, try to put this this clamp over this ever-evolving, ever-changing feminine energy with a distorted masculine energy that's trying to control it. So Easter is on a different day every year, yet it's supposed to commemorate a day when something happened. But 25th of December is the same day every day. Anyway, the wounds of Christ. When you're born into a Christian idea, the Roman real estate cult is just one of them. You're born into worry straight away for the wounds of something you didn't even do. You are guilty by association with Adam and Eve, particularly Eve. So you're born with the worry of a wound of guilt and shame for being born dirty. Now, if you ever looked into the eyes of a baby and never questioned this insanity, that's a whole nother thing. You probably wouldn't be watching this video if that's the case. But when you're conditioned to be in worry of your wounds, so the wounds of Christ, the wounds of Jesus had to die on a cross and have these wounds, literal wounds, through the hands, the stigmata and all of this stuff. Because of the wound of some woman, womb of man, woman, called Eve, that did something way in the distant past, and now you're paying for those sins. You're paying for that. So your wound becomes a worry by default. And so if you are in a space where you don't question that, which I was in for at least the first 16 years of my life, but it's been a continuous question, is it? The quest the eye is on is ever unfolding. Like, I never questioned this idea. Why is Easter different today? Why is it not on a set day? But whenever this wound is this continuous worry, like, you're starting every day in deficit. You're starting in worry, you're starting in guilt, you're starting in shame. And when you are in that place, which I was, it's nearly impossible for you to reach for something higher than what is. If you're starting in deficit every day, you're guilty by association. This wound of this womb, and at the start of time that ate an apple in a tree that God told her not to. You notice how it was the woman got the blame. It's nearly impossible to reach for something higher. But let's say you moved through that. You questioned. And now you've moved into the realm of the spiritual, the realm of the wonder. You've woke up. You're awakening. And you're realizing that the religious stories were and are a distortion of a truth, a divine truth that was distorted to put something between you and God. The priesthood, the savior, whatever it is. So you move through it and you get into the spiritual realm and you get into the multidimensional realm and you start to see and feel and sense and know that you are something much beyond all the stories that you've been told and all the stories you've been telling yourself. Then the wound begins to be the injustice. Then the wound becomes the battle of the masculine and feminine. And the masculine has the wound against the feminine has the wound against the masculine, and you might be in the spiritual, we are one, but yet there's still this wound. There's this worry that the masculine did something wrong to the feminine, so it must be punished, and now the feminine must rise. And so the wound of worry for the masculine is still, I've done something wrong, I wasn't even there, but I may have played it out in this lifetime as well. And for the feminine, there's this wound of we worry that like this continuous suppression will continue, and so that wound becomes continuous worry again. Are we repeating the same cycles? I've opened up into this spirituality, opened up into this multidimensionality, yet the wound becomes the worry that we're going to repeat this cycle again. Masculine dominance, feminine dominance, patriarchy, matriarchy, this continuous one-upmanship of this, like, one being, one thing that's trying to have ascendancy. Matriarchy, patriarchy, it's the same thing. And then we can do some work, and we can get in like deeply into this, and then maybe we move past this wound of masculine feminine divide, and we find this balance within ourselves, and no longer telling the stories of the pure feminine or the evil masculine or the pure masculine and the evil feminine, whatever it happens to be the story. Pick the time, it's a different story. But pick the time, it's the same story. It's the same underlying wound. If that wound doesn't become wisdom, we will repeat the patterns of the past. So if we're still seeing a divide of masculine and feminine, if we're still seeing the need for retribution, the need for punishment, the need for subjugating one aspect of life, whether it be masculine or feminine, it doesn't matter. Masculine and feminine exists as one aspect expressed in polarization. Everything is masculine and feminine. Everything is only masculine, everything is only feminine, and everything is neither. But if we continue this wound, if we continue this trauma, we become trapped by that trauma. We become trapped with the story, trapped with the trauma of the battle of good and evil, the battle of masculine and feminine, the ascendancy, descendancy, the hierarchy, the lower, the higher. We get trapped by the trauma. We become the worry of this wound. So whatever level we go to, if we don't become the treasure of the trauma and we don't become the wisdom of the wound, we continue the story, except it seems like we're doing it at a higher level, but it's the same story. So you can change history because history is now, but the collective story that we've told and this idea that we need to shift something grander outside of ourselves is the worry and is the trap. When we're triggered by something, it's an invitation to find within ourselves, whatever that may be. Whatever we're triggered about the masculine and feminine story, whatever we're triggered about the control and manipulation story, whatever we're triggered about the Bible story or the religious cult stories, myself included, is an invitation to find that pattern within ourselves. Find that wound, find that trauma, and if we so choose, we turn the trauma to treasure and we turn the wound to wisdom. But if we take it to a higher level and we still play out this separation, we still play out the divide and rule, we still play out the feminine over the masculine, or the masculine over the feminine, or this is right and this is wrong, we just continue. So we change the history, we change it to the same story in a different timeline. So it's always within. It's always, what does that grand world story of the Roman real estate cult, of religion, of the suppression of the feminine, of the dominance of the masculine, or in another time you could see the dominance of the feminine and the subjugation of the masculine. If we continue that, we are just adding to the wounds and we're just opening more trauma for future generations. If we cannot find any pattern that triggers us, anything that activates us, anything that strongly moves us, if we can't find that within ourselves, we add to the trauma, we create more wounds. When we can find and see and know that everything that traumatized us and the pattern that it represents, if we can find that within ourselves, then we become the treasure. We become the unmined treasure. The unmined treasure. The mind is the trauma. The story is the trauma. We become the unmined treasure that is unlimited. That trauma now becomes what its purpose was in the first place. It is a treasure to the world. It's an unmined treasure that can be continuously expressed and given to the world, unendingly, infinitely. If we can take the wounds of the Christ story, the wounds of the downtrodden feminine, the wounds of the separation, the wounds of the advanced civilizations that went down this path for a certain path and then collapsed in on the self. If we can turn those wounds into wisdom, we'll no longer be a worry to the world. If we can find that pattern within ourselves of where we are speaking from our wounds, where we are acting from our trauma, if we can find that within ourselves, we become the wisdom embodied. We become the wisdom that worries not. For wisdom cannot worry. Wisdom is lived, embodied life experience. Not something that comes from a book, not something that comes as a generated response to a question, not something that can be defined in any way other than a lived soul experience through a physical body. But anything other than that is adding to the trap of our traumas and adding to the worry of the wounds of the world. So it's so much simpler than we make it, especially when we have this multi-dimensional awakening and these starseed missions and lightworker stuff and all of this. There is this very strong energy that really loves and thrives on making one a special one, that has this mission to change the world, that has this grand thing that they've got the key and only the key, and they're the chosen one. Trauma, wound, worry, trap. But if we can know that we are the world and that our little beautiful piece of that is perfect and whole, and the whole wouldn't be whole without that, without the spiritual ego of I'm here to save the world, or without the story that I've got a key that no one else has got, the trauma becomes a treasure. The wound becomes wisdom, lived and breathed every day through and as you. And this is constant work. People want the event where everything's suddenly going to become easy, and some divine celestial event is just going to take away all our traumas and take away all our wounds. In truth, they are illusory, but we get to choose whether that illusion is saying that the trauma is a treasure or the trauma is a trap. We get to tell the story whether the wounds become wisdom or the wounds become the worry of the world every day, and we wake up in deficit. We wake up the worry. We add to the worries of the world. We add to the trauma of the world. We're trapped by the story of the trauma. So it's a continuous working light. And it's a continuous inward looking. And if it's anything outside, everything outside is pointing you to the inside. We talked about it last week on the video, the trigger formula. If you haven't seen that video, you can go see Triggered in Paradise. If you want the trigger formula, that's it there. So every day I find myself in some form, some of my trauma becoming a trap. In some way, I will find it pretty much every day, some of my wounds becoming a worry. But more and more, and as long as I remember, and as I'm gifted with two beautiful beings around me and the whole world following that trauma trigger formula, that is not a grand thing. But each time I make a trauma a treasure in the smallest way, each time that I don't respond from that trauma and I see it as I see the person as a gift, I see the circumstances as a gift, and I allow my expression in the world to be that, I become the unmined treasure. Little by little, piece by piece, not the grand event. Every breath, every conversation that's had in a different way, every opening of the heart where it used to close. When the wounds of the past become wisdom and not a worry, that little piece of the whole that you are, this perfected, imperfect expression of the holiness, the wholeness that you are, becomes more aware of its wholeness. It becomes more aware of its holiness, not in a flash moment, in a opening, ever opening, and ever expanding, and ever becoming expression of life itself. Little geckos joining us. So it's very easy for the spiritual ego to imagine these grand journeys that are so far beyond us and so world changing and so life shattering and so universe creating. On one level it is absolutely true, but if you're watching this video, you're focused predominantly in a physical form to express and to experience and to remember that you are love in a seemingly loveless place, and you are here to meet hate and anger and fear and judgment with love, if you so choose. Or we can continue the trap of our traumas that are treasure that are unmined, or we continue to worry and add to the worry of the word that are wounds and don't allow them to become wisdom. And then the world is the way it is, but our experience of the world will be filtered through the lens of our trauma and our wounds, of the trap and the worry. So it's really simple, but it's not easy. If every day, in a little way, we can turn one traumatic response into a little treasure for ourselves and someone else. If every day, in a little way, we can glean wisdom and live wisdom from one of our wounds, that is an infinite gift to the whole. That is it's like in the book A Life of Bliss, Living Transmission, AnandA talk about like the moving of your little finger moves the whole universe. So it's this paradoxical thing that we are the all of everything. We need to be, this is something that came through last week or 2 weeks ago. It's the humility to know that we are the all of everything, that we are God. It sounds paradoxical in itself. It's literally the humility to know I am everything. The arrogance comes from the little me. The arrogance that I am this little separate thing, separate from this, and my traumas are this, and I have this agency to do this and not do this, and I all of my actions have this universe shattering experience. And it's paradoxical because simultaneously your little finger moves the whole universe, and you're just one infinitesimally tiny piece of this fathomless, infinite, nameless beingness, that none of it means anything, and it means everything. We have to dance in this paradox and have the humility to know I am God, and drop the arrogance of I am trauma, I am worry, I am the wounds, I am the little me that can be separate from my source. This is what the priesthood did. This is what the distortion is. Putting something between you and your God makes you a little separate self that can do things and create your reality. This is a common theme. There's no creating your reality. Reality already is everything that it is, everything that it was, and everything that it will be. You get to watch it. You get to experience it. And what we call creating reality is actually a shifting of perspective to a reality that already exists, and the little me, in some way, thinks that it did it. Oh, it's so hilarious. And so challenging at the same time. So can we dance in this paradox of the wound, the worry, the wisdom, the trauma, the trap, the treasure? And can we just every day, in a little way, with a simple word, with a simple act, with a simple choice, not easy, add to the unmined treasure of the world and drop the arrogance of trauma? Add the wisdom of releasing the worry to the world from the wounds of a story that never was. And can we have empathy? And can we have the deep understanding, the deep love to allow the knowingness in this dimension that the experience of trauma, the experience of war, the experience of wounds is absolutely real to the human, to the body, to the emotional body? Can we dance in that paradox and choose the path that brings more wisdom and more treasure to the world, rather than the story that adds to the trauma, adds to the trap, adds to the worry, and adds to the wounds? I'm hearing the this is the polarization of this, or the paradox. Death by 1,000 cuts. How can we do that? Flip that distortion and reframe the death by 1,000 cuts into a small action little action, a little thought, a kind word, a smile where there's no smile, where we can uplift by just tiny little actions, tiny little inactions, tiny little things that you do, tiny little things that you don't do, tiny little things when you notice a thought and you don't act out on it. So we can flip this inversion of death by 1,000 cuts and become life by infinite upward rising ups of just a simple choice. It's not these grand things, and simultaneously it is. But the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, and you don't take one step 1,000 miles. That's not what this dimension's about. It's not what this body's about. It's not what this earth is about. And when people receive the grand vision, which I have, and you watching this will have, we see this utopia. We see this heaven on earth. We see this truth of an aspect of earth that already exists, that we are already existing there. But we are in this dimension where we want to experience the time. We want to experience the trauma, the trap, the treasure. We want to experience. And I like how that went. It didn't go in linear time like that. It was like the treasure's always in the middle. So this is not mirrored, but if we're starting with the trauma, we're jumping over to the trap, and in the middle actually is the treasure. We want to experience this time-bound body, apparently, to have the wound, go to the worry, and find the wisdom within. We're not jumping from the trauma and the wound, and their purposes have no meaning and no value. If I spoke in the video last week about AI and artificial intelligence and instantaneous answers, and while it has its place, and I know it has its place, and it's inevitable, making that jump, that instantaneous jump, that instant gratification for a journey to wisdom, a journey to the treasure of God within you, or this this idea that every system on the earth has to just collapse instantaneously. It's this event, it's this app spirituality, this constant idea that there's an event, and it doesn't matter if it's a series of events or just one grand event. It's like this something has to happen and then everything's going to be fine. We don't jump from there to there. That's not, because then there's no experience. There's no experience for the soul. The wisdom of the wound comes through lived experience and transcending it and realizing what can become of that wound. The treasure of the trauma comes, if you have the trauma and instantaneously you're at the treasure of it. In this dimension, it doesn't have any treasure there. It's worthless treasure. It's a mind treasure. It is a mind, M-I-N-D, and a mind, M-I-N-E-D, something you're taking from the earth instantaneously. You're taking some value from the earth because you feel that you're not valuable. You need to take something from the earth. You need to mind it. And that's because the mind feels like it's something missing it needs to take. And I'm a poor little me that is traumatized by the trauma of the story of Eve eating the apple, of the Roman real estate cult, of the suppression of the feminine, of the whatever it happens to be. So I'm traumatized, so I'm going to mind that. I'm going to mind that. I'm going to take that and I'm going to make it mine. That story is going to be mine. I'm going to make it mine. And it's mind. The unmined treasure is no mind. And it's not taking. It's receiving. It's receiving the wisdom of the unmined treasure. The trauma, the trap has been transcended. And the unmined treasure is your gift of being you, despite of the traumas that you've experienced in this life. The wisdom comes from the lived experience of the forgetting, of the waking up in worry, of the waking up every day in deficit. For 20 years, I woke up in deficit every day. When you're in addictions with alcohol or drugs or any of those things, you wake up in minus. You don't even wake up at zero, you wake up at minus. So you're in deficit. So how can you reach any higher? But the same thing can be happening if you're continuously in a fight or a battle with the masculine feminine story, in the fight with the cabal and the reptilians and the government story. if you're in a constant story of the galactic battles and the galactic wars, you're constantly in a deficit. You're whole, wholly, and complete, but you're starting in a minus. You're starting as a victim. You're starting from the wound. You're starting from the trauma. And hands up, everyone, if you're truly honest, will know that we all are there at some stage in this life, in this journey. That's the human journey. It's the imperfectly perfect human journey. But if you can wake up and just in one moment of the day, you turn a trauma into a treasure, you turn a wound into wisdom, that's more than enough. It's not even enough. Language can't even describe it. Because everything in this reality is pointing you towards victimhood, is pointing you towards the arrogance of the separate self, is pointing you away from the be still and know I am. So how can we shift this death by 1,000 cuts into life by infinite ups? Just one at a time, one action at a time, one thought at a time, one hug at a time, one smile at a time. And the grand visions and the grand missions all happen one choice at a time, one movement at a time, one moment at a time. And they don't jump, even though the video appeared. We begin at the end. We begin at the end by knowing we are one, by knowing it's already done, and we get to play out the journey of the character that's going from the beginning to the middle of the end. So when we begin at the end, we are not skipping the journey of going from the trauma to the treasure. We're knowing that there is already a treasure there, but we don't know where it is. Again, if you already received the treasure, then it doesn't become valuable to you. Because you know you are everything, have always been everything, you don't value the treasure that you are until you've forgotten that you are, and you get traumatized. And you go through the journey of that story, and you go through the life, and then that trauma becomes the treasure that you've been sitting on all along. It reminds me of the story of the rich man walking along the street, and there was a beggar sat on a box, and the beggar was sat there every day, and the rich man walked past every day and noticed him, and he mostly walked past. The beggar was very miserable, and he was very much in his trauma and his wound, and he sat with his sad face and looking for someone to give him some food, to give him some money. And one day the rich man got curious, and he saw the man sitting in the box, and the rich man was a wealthy man, he was a curious man, he asked questions, and he thought this day, I wonder what is in that box. And so he said, out of curiosity, he said to the poor man, I will give you. So the poor man's asking for pennies, and he says, I will give you $1 to give me what's in the box. And the poor man thinks this is the greatest thing ever. He thinks this is his greatest day, and he happily takes the dollar and runs off into the sunset with his dollar. And the rich man, the wealthy man, lifts the box, and inside the box is a box of gold. And the poor man has been sitting on a box of gold his whole life. And because he was looking for a little pittance, he was looking for something outside himself, and a hummingbird has just appeared. Oh my God, the timing of that. He's been looking for a pittance outside of himself from someone else because he felt he was separate, he felt he couldn't have, he felt poor in spirit. He couldn't see the treasure that he was sitting on. And the man that was able to ask the man, or the woman that was able to ask the question, be curious, what's inside? What's below? What's here that I just haven't even looked at? I haven't bothered to look at. I haven't noticed. What's here? And the treasure was there. The gold was there. The gold was inside all of the time. That's turning the trauma of poverty into the treasure and the wisdom of asking a question, asking a deeper question, not continuing the story of poverty, continuing the story of poor me, continuing the story of the wound or the trauma. So the quest the eye is on, the question is, what question are you asking? Not what answers have you come to. Answers, as we see more and more now, answers, before answers were very valuable. answers were very valuable in times when, before the times there was books in the printing press, answers were the absolute pinnacle of gold. And in the time of newspapers and libraries in the printing press, it was still very valuable, because answers were, you were only able to find them in newspapers and books and libraries, and you had to go through all of these things and then encyclopedias. And as we've come into the age of information and internet, there was a period where, because so much information was suppressed and held back, there was a time that information was highly, highly valuable and answers were highly, highly valuable. But now we've come to a time in 2025 when we're recording this, where every answer to human knowledge is available instantly. And we thought it was before, when we had like Google search and all of these things. But now, with this explosion of technology, every answer to anything on the knowledge of humanity is instantly available. So its value to us will become less and less, and it's going to diminish overnight. Answers to questions and its value, which has been very valuable to us for many, many hundreds and maybe thousands of years, is going to be like no value. The ability to ask a question that can't be answered by something responding in words or text, it doesn't matter where that's coming from, that is going to be the real value. Those who can question the trauma and wounds, that is going to be the real value. That is the ones that is going to provide real value and model real value, and that those who have the answers to questions will no longer be seen as valuable. Because when, as a human, you have everything, and you can have everything, you value nothing. It is only in the experience that there's something to discover, which is the quest the eye is on, is asking more and more questions. When we're just stuck with the answer, it's finished, it's closed, it's done. I've got the answer. It doesn't evolve. The real and true value and wealth is in the question. So what is the quest the eye is on? The quest the eye is on is see the trap of the trauma and be the treasure today. Is to see the wisdom and the worry and be wisdom today. And ask a question, how can I be the unmined treasure today and no longer add to the trauma or the trap? How can I be the wisdom and no longer add to the worry of the world and repeat the wounds and die by 1,000 cuts, and be the life by infinite ups, by asking more and more questions that don't need answers? We can ask a question that doesn't need an answer. We become the answer the more questions we ask. The more questions, the deeper the question. We don't stick with the answer. We ask a question, become the answer, ask another question, become the answer. We ask another question, become the answer, and that's the wisdom and the wonder of the world that we are becoming. But if we continue the story of the wounds, the trauma, the trap, the worry, we just cycle in and cycle on and continue the victimhood of the masculine, the feminine, the good, the evil, those who have, the wealthy, the poor. We continue that cycle. And what's the question? What's the answer to that? There's never ending, limited answers as to why we repeat the same stories over and over again. But if we stay with the question, we become the answer without stop. We're not like, there's not a destination. The journey is the point. We just continuously question, am I responding from my trauma? Like full transparency. Every day I respond from my trauma. I'm trapped by my trauma and I respond in a little way, but more and more every day in little ways, I respond as the unmined treasure. Every day, I'm sure I'm speaking from a wound, especially with my wife and son, my greatest teachers. I'm speaking and acting from a wound. So I'm adding to the worry of the world, but more and more every day, there are times, especially when I'm in space with people who call it from me and reflect it to me, that I become the wisdom of the world in a little way. Again, it's not grand. Don't try. It's not the spiritual ego wants to like attach onto this. No, it's a little smile. It's a kind word. It's meeting anger with neutrality. And it's simple, but it's not easy. So it's starting to get very hot here. We're just going to an ecstatic dance in Uvita, Costa Rica at 11:11. We spent an incredible day yesterday with some very beautiful people, adults and children, who I see and know are very much adding to the unmined treasure and the wisdom of the world, and who shared their wounds and shared their traumas and can see the trap of the traumas and can see where the worry that they've added to the world, and they're bringing their wisdom, and they're giving it all, and they're asking questions. So the invitation today is, where can you find more questions that don't need an answer? Where can you be the answer to the question that is not a fixed answer? Where can you be the wisdom of the world in a little way? Where can you be the unmined treasure by making a different choice, by choosing a different thought? That's the quest the eye is on, and that's the invitation on this East Star Rising Sun Day. East Star Rising Sun Day. You can make of that what you will. I am on a life mission to ignite, unite, and highlight 144,000 heart leaders living and giving their unique genius in the world, and to impact and inspire the next 7 generations on Earth, leaving a legacy of love. One step at a time, one breath at a time, one smile at a time. Until next time, from my heart to yours, the divine in me sees, loves, and honors the divine in you. Namaste. We are